ancient Norse seafarers who were inhumanly large, brutish, and killed everything in their path. These were the Vikings. At least, that's what popular culture wants us to believe. In reality, the Vikings weren't the barbarians that we have branded them. They were a group of greatly intelligent, civilized, and hard-working people. Their unique culture and belief system was misunderstood by other cultures, which helped contribute to a false reputation that is still upheld today. But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. If you picture Vikings as a long-haired and bearded group of warmongers, you wouldn't be wrong. However, you would be mistaken if you assumed that they were dirty, stinky, and careless people. In reality, the Vikings cared greatly about their personal hygiene. Although they may have lived in harsh conditions and were known to have bushy beards and long hair, they took care of themselves. Many different Viking grooming tools and equipment have been discovered that were used by both men and women. These include things such as combs, razors, and even ear swabs. One of the biggest misconceptions about the Vikings was that they wore horned helmets into battle. However, this has been proven to be completely false. If they wore helmets at all in combat, they certainly didn't have horns on them because there have been no artifact discovered to suggest this was something that Vikings wore. The idea behind the horned helmets came from the Victorian era to romanticize the image of the Vikings. They were described as wearing these scary-looking helmets in order to make them seem as savage and horrifying as possible. Unknown to many people, the Norse gods worshipped by the Vikings are a part of our everyday lives. The days of the week are actually references to the names of specific gods. The great raven god Odin, also known as Woden, is now Wednesday, which literally means Woden's Day. Tuesday and Friday are named after Tyr and Frigg, the god and goddess of war and marriage. The most famous is Thor, the god of thunder and strength, for Thursday. While much of Viking culture may be lost, it's interesting that something as fundamental as the days of our modern week can be directly traced back to their belief system. The Vikings may be best remembered for their reputation for being fierce warriors and ruthless raiders. But that wasn't their full-time profession. They wouldn't be able to establish such a complex society if they were always sailing around looking for treasure and a fight. For the most part, Vikings spent much more time farming and maintaining their settlements than anything else. The term Viking simply referred to all Scandinavians that were ever involved in overseas expeditions, essentially grouping them all into one category. In the Scandinavian peninsula, the earliest evidence of skiing dates back almost 6,000 years ago. During the Viking Age, skiing was a means of transportation during the winter, when the majority of the land was covered in snow and ice. However, it was later discovered that Vikings might not have used skiing strictly for transportation, but also for recreation. In Norse mythology, there is even a god for skiing named Ullr. It has also been assumed that skiing was also used in warfare as a means to scout through the wilderness and as a way to move vast armies across terrain that would otherwise be unpassable. Much like the Spartans of Greece, strength and health were necessary qualities for Viking children. If a child was born sickly and weak, unable to fight or contribute to society, they were considered to be a burden and useless. As a means of saving resources and their own time, these children were either abandoned in the forest or thrown into the ocean. This was seen as a better alternative or even a mercy. Viking life was hard, so there was no room to coddle a child. Only around 80% of Viking children lived to the age of 5, and at that time were expected to work, learn to fight, and contribute just like any other person. Nearly 500 years before Christopher Columbus ever sailed the ocean blue, the first Europeans to ever step foot in North America was a group of Vikings led by Leif Erikson. Leif Erikson's own father, Eric the Red, was a famous traveler before his son, establishing the first European settlement of Greenland. Supposedly, Eric the Red had also sailed from Iceland to Canada and encouraged his son Leif to explore new lands as well. This led to Leif eventually discovering North America, although he made no moves to take over the land or attack the Native Americans. For the most part, the Viking discovering of North America remained unknown long after Christopher Columbus took the credit as the first European. Vikings are commonly depicted as being giant, muscular men with the ability to kill their enemies with one swing of an axe. However, that's an over-exaggeration. They didn't look like Rollo from the History Channel show Vikings or Chris Hemsworth in Thor. They were typically around 5 feet 7 inches and were leaner than they were burly. Their smaller size can be attributed to short summer seasons, resulting in fewer resources and limited food. This scarcity also explains their raids to acquire goods. The image of towering Vikings, like horned helmets, was largely fictional, meant to make them appear more fearsome and inhuman. Although tattooing predates Viking culture, there's no solid evidence Vikings had tattoos. Despite popular portrayals, no physical proof confirms they practiced body art. Given their high standards of hygiene, it's possible they avoided permanent skin markings altogether. Vikings were fastidious about cleanliness, but that didn't apply when making fire. They used touchwood fungus soaked in human urine for days, creating a smoldering material that stayed lit during travel. The sodium nitrate in urine helped the substance smolder rather than burn outright, allowing them to transport fire efficiently. Given their strong connection to the sea, boat burials were a respected tradition. In Norse belief, the dead, especially warriors, needed a vessel to reach the afterlife, particularly Valhalla. Important individuals were buried in ships alongside weapons, food, treasures, and, at times, sacrificed slaves to serve them in the next life. The Vikings believed the way one lived and died determined their afterlife destination. The bravest warriors went to Valhalla, while those who lived honorably but didn't die in battle went to Helgafell. Helheim, however, was reserved for the dishonored, those who died of sickness or old age, rather than in combat. Before battle, some Vikings consumed hallucinogenic mushrooms that triggered frenzied behavior, which they believed to be possession by supernatural forces. Some historians argue this behavior could also stem from untreated trauma or PTSD, which may have contributed to their notorious berserker rage. Vikings acquired most of their slaves through raids, particularly in Eastern Europe and the British Isles. Slavery could also be a punishment within their own society. Slaves were traded like livestock and used for labor, though some earned or bought their freedom. In 2009, archaeologists uncovered Viking skulls with carved tooth markings. While the purpose remains uncertain, the prevailing theory is that these dental modifications served as a status symbol, showcasing wealth or rank, an early, crude version of what we now call grills. Viking mythology significantly influenced J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. The Norse legend of Andvari's Ring, a cursed artifact, mirrors the cursed ring in Tolkien's trilogy. Moreover, the setting name Midgard, meaning Middle Earth, directly aligns with Tolkien's universe, proving Norse tales were a strong inspiration for his work. While popular media often depicts all Vikings as blonde, this aspect is accurate. Blonde hair was considered beautiful, so those without it would bleach their hair using soap with high lye content. Some men even bleached their beards for a more striking appearance. Viking women, though not fully equal, had notable rights for their time. Married young, they were expected to manage domestic life but could inherit property, file for divorce, and reclaim dowries. In the absence of a husband, the wife assumed control of the household. Though rare, some women, known as shield maidens, fought in battle alongside men. Thanks to the prominence of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you've probably figured this one out already, but modern-day comic books owe a lot to Viking culture. Characters like Thor, Odin, Loki, and Freya are essentially Vikings thrown into modern-day scenarios. In the comics, Thor must leave his homeland of Asgard to protect Earth. Video games, too, often adapt Viking lore to bring the past to life for modern audiences. Though unpleasant, Viking battlefield medicine included a unique method for diagnosing internal injuries. Wounded warriors were fed potent onion soup, and after some time, someone would smell their wounds. If the scent of onions emerged, it indicated a stomach wound, usually a fatal injury in that era. Harald Bluetooth, a legendary Viking king, united various tribes in Denmark and Norway under one rule. When Jim Cardack developed the wireless Bluetooth technology, he named it after the king to reflect the idea of unification. Even the Bluetooth symbol merges the Nordic runes for B and H, Harald's initials. According to legend, Ragnar Lothbrok had 3 wives, Thora, Aslog, and Lagertha, and fathered many famous sons, Ivar the Boneless, Sigurd Snake in the Eye, Bjorn Ironside, and Ube among them. While these sons were real, Ragnar's existence is debated. He may have been a composite of several historical figures. One tale says Ragnar had a son, Ube, through an affair with the daughter of a Viking named Esbjorn. Later, Ube and his father clashed in rebellion, a tragic turn that didn't stop Ube from becoming a key leader in the Great Heathen Army's invasion of England. Ragnar's relationships with his sons were complex. Some stories suggest he exiled them to avoid threats to his throne. One account claims Ragnar sent Bjorn away, prompting him to begin his own raids through Europe and the Mediterranean. Due to conflicting stories and multiple reported deaths, historians believe Ragnar may not have been a single person. In one story, he dies of dysentery in Paris after leading 120 ships. The improbability of surviving such episodes suggests his legend was pieced together from several different men's lives. Ragnar's second marriage was unusual. After hearing of a beautiful girl named Kraka, he challenged her to meet him under strange conditions, not dressed or undressed, fed or hungry, alone or accompanied. She arrived draped in a fishing net and her own hair, a bite of food in her mouth, and a dog by her side, impressing Ragnar completely. He later discovered Kraka was actually Aslog, daughter of the dragon slayer Sigurd the Volsung. Aslog also had prophetic abilities. She foresaw that one of their sons would have dragon eyes and deformities, and that Ragnar's invasion of England would end in defeat, prophecies that eerily came true. Although the History Channel's Vikings portrays Ragnar as the brother of Rollo, this is almost certainly inaccurate. While Ragnar is a semi-mythical figure, Rollo was real, born around 845. He became the first ruler of Normandy after raiding the Kingdom of West Francia. Historically, Ragnar and Rollo likely never met. At his height, Ragnar commanded the Great Heathen Army, a coalition of mostly Danish warriors. In 845, he famously led an attack on Paris, forcing King Charles the Bald to pay a massive ransom in gold and silver to make them leave. The name Lothbrok wasn't Ragnar's birth name. He earned it while trying to win over his first wife, Thora. Vikings under Ragnar's command relied on surprise tactics. During the Siege of Paris, they struck on Easter Sunday when the population was distracted by Mass. King Charles split his army across the Seine, allowing Ragnar to overwhelm one half, execute hundreds, and hang over 100 survivors on an island as a sacrifice to Odin and a warning. Whether Ragnar was real or myth, the Great Heathen Army's conquests are well documented. Led by Ivar the Boneless and his brothers, they defeated English kings Osbert, Edmund, and El. Ivar eventually ruled over vast territories, including Dublin and York, leaving a lasting impact on English history.